Now we're going to jump in with a panel discussion about empathy and leadership. The pandemic has tested all of us, including businesses right across the country. We thought it would be enlightening to hear from three of Canada's top corporate leaders, the challenges that they faced during what's probably been their most difficult year. What does it take to lead successfully during a pandemic? And what is the role of empathy in leadership and business? Leading this conversation is our board chair, Christy Clark, whom I'm sure many of you already know. Christy spent 15 years in politics. She was the first woman elected as Premier of British Columbia and the only woman in Canadian history to have been re-elected Premier anywhere in Canada. She calls that a sad statement about women in politics. Today, Christy is the senior advisor at the law firm Bennett Jones. She co-chairs the advisory board for the Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill University. And in 2018, she was recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women by the Women's Executive Network. And she was inducted into the WXN Hall of Fame. Over to you, Christy.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just thrilled to be a part of this symposium. And I am excited to have a conversation with two great leaders today. I have taken on one of the most important jobs I'll ever do, and that's chairing Roots of Empathy. Today, I have the privilege to join two of North America's most successful and influential business leaders in a conversation about something that matters to us all, and that's empathy at work. At the age of 13, Shahrzad Rafati knew she wanted to create a global empire. She left Iran, came to Canada. She had just one suitcase and very limited English. Today, Shahrzad knows no limits. She is the founder and the CEO of Broadband TV. It's a media tech company that's had spectacular growth. They create and monetize online content. Her clients include the NBA, Sony, Warner Brothers, and Disney. Tamara Vrooman directed and managed almost $50 billion as British Columbia's Deputy Minister of Finance. Then she went on to lead Vancity, Canada's largest credit union with assets of $23 billion. And she's now the CEO of the Vancouver Airport, which employs 26,000 people. Tamara, Shahrzad, thank you very much for joining us today. Now let me start with this, because there is one issue that has defined our lives for almost more than this last year, and this is the pandemic. It's upended every kind of business in every corner of the world. It's exposed deep inequities between us. And as we emerge from it, we'll find that workplaces have been altered in many ways. Can empathy play a role in helping us heal? Can it help us build something better in the new normal? I saw a study recently that concluded remote working requires a lot more empathy from supervisors and employers. And this pandemic has required leaders to connect with their teams in totally different ways. So I'd like to ask each of you, maybe starting with Tamara, how has this experience through this pandemic both changed the way that you lead, and how do you think it's going to change the way you do business in the future?
Yeah, thanks very much, Christy. And thanks to you and the Roots of Empathy program. Been a long admirer of that work and the importance of seeding empathy in children in the next generation for many, many years. And so empathy is really, in my mind, about being able to see an issue or an opportunity from the perspective of the other. And when we think about what this pandemic has done, is it's shown us that we're more connected than we ever thought we were, that our work lives and our home lives are intertwined in ways that many of us not only maybe didn't welcome, but didn't always predict. And that if we're going to think about the uncertainty of the future, we need to understand the experience from a diversity of perspectives. And so when you ask, how does empathy play a role in my leadership at the airport? It's all of those things. You know, for the almost 100,000 people that normally go through our airport each and every day and their needs to the needs of our staff, understanding what they're going through and where they're coming from, and designing our business processes, our financing, our support, including just the way that we interact daily with one another, is a huge part of making sure that we can deliver on the kind of safety, customer service, employee experience that YVR is known for, not only in this country, but in North America and around the world. And so it has profoundly affected my leadership. You know, I've always been somebody who has thought that empathy was an underrated leadership trait. You know, it should stand in the pantheon of decisiveness, focus, vision, the ability to really understand and appreciate things from a different point of view, including the human experience. The pandemic has absolutely made that essential as we're navigating the fact that we're all in this together, and we think about the different experiences and the different ways that we're going to need to work, as well as serve our customers going forward out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Tamara. I appreciate it. Shahrzad, what are your reflections on how the pandemic has changed the way you do business, the way you lead a team, what you think things are going to look like in the future?
Really good question. I mean, everything that, first of all, I do want to also thank you and Roots of Empathy for organizing this great symposium. And obviously, it's great to connect with everyone here and discuss such an important topic. I think first, we need to really talk about what is empathy. Empathy is really the ability to step into shoes of another person, aiming to truly understand their feelings and perspectives, and to really use that understanding to really guide our actions. And during, obviously, this pandemic, empathy is more important than ever before. And the reason why I think it's very important is because without a question, we all know that good values really generate great results. And one thing I want to actually point out is that one focus on diversity actually helps with other forms of diversity. And when you think about inclusivity, inclusivity creates inclusivity. And when you solve for one form of inequality, you can create room to solve for other forms. And sharing your lived experiences can really bring your team together as people that can relate to one another. Mm-hmm. And I think that empathy is really a defining factor for a successful team. It encourages, of course, all of us to see the world from each other's eyes and really to foster our organizations, the values that actually bring us together. And when it comes to BBTV, that includes two of our core values, care and collaboration. And care in really our interactions, in our execution, in our diversity, and in everything that we actually produce. And collaboration, which is one of the other core values that we have at BBTV, it's also like, if you look at it, it really comes down to collaboration and how we actually work together as a team, and in really uncovering mutually beneficial outcomes to build a long-term success. And that ultimately leads to a really healthier organization, because our culture is stronger and more connected. And, you know, we're also physically and mentally healthier, right? We're more motivated. We're more passionate about the impacts that we can make together. And this really encapsulates the other two values that we have at BBTV, which are drive and creativity. And when I speak to drive, it's really drive in how we actually overcome obstacles and inspire greatness from one another in our relentless pursuit of obviously pushing the boundaries of what's actually possible. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about creativity, creativity is really in how we actually approach and redefine potential problems, obviously formulate innovative and imaginative responses in our solutions. And the data actually says it all. The data really says it all as to how this can actually drive business performance.
Well, that leads me to, I mean, you're talking, Shahrzad, about gender diversity, which is something I thought about a lot. And I think both of you will have, having to fight your way to the top in what are really male-dominated areas. And, you know, I had this dilemma all the time. And I saw it in all my female colleagues. About half our cabinet was women. You know, it's hard to be tough and to be liked at the same time. How do each of you navigate that so that you can be seen both as being effective at work, having the right stuff to drive forward, but also allowing yourself to practice empathy and show some softness without undermining people's sense that you're someone who's going to be capable of doing the job?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And so there's two reflections I have on that. First of all, I think when we talk about leadership, we often think about it as one way. To me, it's leadership is a two-way street. And so in order to be an empathetic leader and bring empathy into our workplace, whether you're a man or a woman, you need to not only be able to see and really understand the experience of the other, you also have to be willing, and here's the hard part, to show your own experience and vulnerability. And I think, frankly, I've had to learn that as a leader over time. It didn't always come naturally to me, but my experience has been when I do that, the ability to get that cycle of performance and culture that Shahrzad talked about absolutely accelerates. And so when we think about men and women, we know that it's less about men and women biologically and more about men and women socially and culturally. And that feminine traits are seen as being soft and masculine traits are seen as being firm and decisive. And I equally feel for men who have sort of a more feminine style in the workplace as well. I see that they also have struggled to be heard and to be seen as effective leaders equally with women. So I really do think it is about the way that we perceive these things. And so we do need to get to a place where we are both comfortable, and that's why Roots of Empathy is so important, both comfortable educating both boys and girls to be open and comfortable with who we are and share our own experiences, because we can only be empathetic to others if we allow others to share in our empathy. And then in the workplace and in leadership, how do we get the fact that we know that companies perform better that have empathetic leadership? We know the results are there. How do we it's almost like I want to have a recall on all business leadership programs and get everybody back into the classroom for a 2 or 3 month seminar to redefine leadership away from vision, focus, decisiveness to empathy, creativity, deep listening, and diversity. And so it absolutely projects on women differently than it projects on men. I think equally, though, some men experience it as well. And really what we have to get to is what are the qualities that really drive the results of the companies that are truly superior? How do those perform over time? And how can we start to talk about empathy less as a soft skill and more as an essential business competency to delivering results, which it absolutely is, and has the benefit of doing the right thing, being more inclusive and more human-centered.
Thanks, Tamara. And of course, Shahrzad, if we have more women and more people from diverse backgrounds around the table, we hear those voices which may be expressing themselves in different ways, and it normalizes that kind of approach, perhaps one that's more empathetic.
For sure. I do want to highlight a few facts. I'm obviously, as you know, a computer scientist, so I'm very much so fact-driven. Look, the reality is that half the women in the world don't make their own income. And that closing the gap would actually help the world economy by $28 trillion, which is a significant increase. And this is why when we talk about building a quadruple bottom line business, which what I mean by that is you're not only measuring success based on your financial KPIs, but you're actually measuring success based on people, social, and environmental KPIs. We are a quadruple bottom line business. And building a quadruple bottom line business can actually lead into both a more ethical business, but also a higher performing organization. And I think, again, research shows this because companies that are practicing it are 48% more likely to outperform their peers. And we've also seen the same thing across the organization when it comes to our team's performance. And I think to just build on, I think Tamara's point, how do you achieve this? Well, it comes down to setting goals, measuring them, and really reporting on them. You need to really make sure that you have the right processes, the pipeline, the incentives, and systems in place to be able to make those goals a reality. Mm-hmm. And if you kind of, for example, look at our bottom lines, I'm very proud to say that at BBTV, gender pay gap has been 0% over the last 5 years. We have 40% female representation at the board level, at the manager level, and then at the company level. And we are a global business. This is not a small business. We achieve 40 billion monthly views across 600 million monthly active users. We are the second largest video property in the world after Google. So size is no longer an excuse. And because of our diversity and because of the core values, which really at the core of it, we're talking about empathy. This is why we've been so successful when you're looking at the landscape. And I think, just to give you another example with BBTV, we've implemented, for example, a gender interviewing policy that really assures that we always interview at least 2 qualified female and male candidates for every open role. And this allows you to have actually a very strong pipeline and to make sure that you can achieve your targets. So again, just like any business pillar, building actually a quadruple bottom line business does require the willingness, the desire to be accountable to our progress. And that accountability is really key. And it's really one that we want to actually see, obviously, across more leaders, whether if it is community leaders, political leaders, or business owners.
Fantastic. I love it. I mean, of course, people do get to choose their political leaders, I guess, in a more of a random process, because you'll often have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 people running for office. That certainly doesn't guarantee diversity, though. At the end of the day, it works a lot better when you do it the way that Shahrzad does it. I can tell you that. So let me ask you this, guys. Neither of you is sitting in your office offering emotional support and therapy to employees directly. You've got hundreds or thousands of employees, each of you. Can I ask you to each offer our viewers today, our delegates today, some practical tips for creating the processes that will allow employees and people, at your workplaces to not just be heard, but to actually trust that they are being heard and that, what they're saying is going to influence the future of the company or the future of work? And maybe I can start to go back to Tamara.
Certainly. So a few of the things that we've been working on even before the pandemic, but particularly focusing on during the pandemic is really around opportunities to be transparent and to have two-way exchange. And so while we do have thousands of employees who work here at the airport, and actually one of the benefits of the pandemic, before the pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to get everybody on screen and participating together like we are able to do now. And so we have every week, need it or not, an all staff conversation about the things that matter in our organization. And it's half an hour. It's my initials are TV, Tamara Vrooman, so it's called Live TV, which is what staff started to call it. And it's half an hour where I talk about what I'm experiencing and feeling as a leader, what I'm seeing in the business, how it's translating for me, what I'm certain about, what I'm not certain about, because everybody wants answers in this environment, and frankly, there aren't always the kind of categorical answers that we would like to be able to give. And then provide an opportunity for staff to ask me questions very directly in the moment, and I respond, and vice versa. That cadence has really built a lifeline and a bit of a drumbeat, if you will, across the organization in a time of disconnectedness that has really helped the culture. We've also talked about leadership behaviors and been quite clear, just like as Shahrzad said, we're clear about our financial results, we're clear about our customer service and our safety accountabilities and our climate commitments. We are equally clear about our leadership behaviors and what is required to lead with empathy. And we talk about it that way, and we have training, and we measure it, and we call to action, and we ask our staff if they're seeing evidence of that behavior. And then the final thing we do is we actually talk to the people who are ultimately the beneficiaries of the service that we provide. And so, nobody builds an airport as an end unto itself, right? You wouldn't build an airport. It is only there to serve the community and the economy that supports it. And so we equally, and this was, I remember we first started to do it, people were like, well, why? You're talking to business suppliers about things like how we're showing up, how we're listening, how we're understanding what they're experiencing, equally to whether the parcel is arriving on time and in one piece. And so we've really embedded it as part of the way we do business and looked for ways to make it real and actionable, and we hold people to account, just in the way you would to any other business results, and it's bearing results.
Fantastic. And Shahrzad, yours totally different business, one you've built from the ground up. How has your business, made sure that your employees are feeling really listened to and connected in this time?
Yeah, COVID has really made many businesses think differently. And I think the global pandemic has really brought the need for empathy to be really at the forefront. And it really has highlighted that we need to collectively find common ground. And in many ways, we actually are all having a shared experience. We're all having to go through COVID, through Zoom windows, FaceTime calls, and we're getting a really unique closeness with each other. And at BBTV, collaboration and camaraderie, I think, have never been actually higher. Empathetic communication and transparency are really key. And despite, of course, working from home, we're actually incredibly close-knit as a team. I feel that actually our team is more connected than ever before. And I'm very, of course, proud of the team for how much they've come together and they've grown greater empathy for each other. And what I really want to point out that is very important is that despite all the difficulties that we've experienced and the team has experienced, they're supporting our community more than ever before. You look at some of the initiatives that we worked on, Fun Indoors, which was really at the beginning of COVID, and supporting Doctors Without Borders and COVID relief. We also had an employee-initiated committee of work for peace, which was in response to Black Lives Matter movement. So really, social good is, of course, a big part of the business, and it's something that really unites everyone together, and we're seeing more of it, more than ever before. Now, going back to the topic of leadership and accountability, I think that we need to take a moment and look at, of course, where we see ourselves today. We've had the largest global pandemic, of course, in over 100 years. And the world has been in lockdown. And, the whole industries, have slowed down, pivoted, or even ceased to exist. And this was really followed closely by one of the most important human rights movements, which we've seen in generations. And I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. So with all that has happened in the past year, there have been, realizations as to importance of leadership. And I think we've seen vividly contrasting leadership styles by different world leaders who have demonstrated dramatically different results in terms of how they've managed through the pandemic, comforting the public, of course, through loss and upheaval. And, we've become painfully aware of the absence of leadership when it has occurred. And we've seen also strong and unlikely leaders that have emerged. And empathy is really one of the things that best leaders have in common. Leaders absolutely need to be empathetic in today's, of course, diverse world. And I believe that empathy is really the key to inclusivity. And we need to listen, do our best to really understand a variety of perspectives that we represent and really impact through our business. And really great leadership is at the heart of positive change in the world, and from accountability to equality and, of course, justice. And the solution to the actually world's problem is in great leadership. And I truly believe that empathy is really at the core of that.
Fantastic. Thank you for both of you for your really thoughtful answers on that one. And because to me, one of the things that I think you touched on this, Shahrzad, is that this has been about individuals leading too. BLM has been about people getting out to the forefront and saying, I'm just a citizen here, but I want to have a say, which is so vitally important. And as leaders, both of you have talked about your clients, your customers, your employees, and how important it is for you to all listen to them. So I'm going to, we don't have tons more time. So I'll share with you my experience when I was in politics was probably not at all different from what you have in business, which is I never had time for anything. And I felt like it was the tyranny of the urgent. Whatever was in front of me, that was what I was dealing with. And so trying to find time to spend time doing things that were long-term, but also really investing emotionally in the people around me and spending time with them was hard. And I think often, culturally we thought of it as costly because it meant that time should be spent doing other things. So my question for both of you, I think, and maybe again, we'll go back to Tamara and then Shahrzad, you next. Does it cost money to practice empathy? Does it cost your business if you're going to spend your time thinking about people and talking to them and listening to them and doing all those things when you should be thinking about the bottom line?
The short answer is no. It doesn't cost your organization money to be empathetic. In fact, it costs your organization and your company money to not be empathetic because the damage that it does and the problems and the risks that you don't see because you haven't been able to really understand the needs of your employees, your customers, your communities, to see business opportunities from a different point of view. I mean, think about it. Innovation, and Shahrzad can certainly speak to this, but innovation often comes from solving problems from a different point of view. How can we possibly be innovative if we're not empathetic? The two are not in conflict. They are essential to one another. And, I think what you're getting at there is that old business saying, and it is old, that time is money. Benjamin Franklin first said that, and he was talking to, I think it was in an essay about tradespeople. So he was really talking about the fact that you have to be efficient when you're fixing someone's sink. That is probably true. But when you're building a company and results, really building practices that sustain innovation, creativity, engagement, and opportunity, those are the investments that pay the biggest dividends, and empathy is definitely one of them.
Thanks, Tamara. Shahrzad?
Yes, the same. Actually, you can save money. I do agree with you 100%. And I think we see this because, again, as I said, value builds culture and culture drives performance. And we've seen this and we know this, that, the stats are there, that if you look at how if you actually utilize empathy, then you can actually practice inclusivity, and inclusivity brings inclusivity. And we know that companies that are more inclusive, they are higher performing. We've done a lot of studies and we looked at a lot of stats around this when it comes to female empowerment, female leadership. And we know that, companies that are practicing it, that are 48% more likely to outperform their peers. And these are stats based on real companies. We're seeing this at BBTV. You look at our performance from 2014 to 2019 in terms of performance per head, it has increased by a factor of 7x as actually we've become more of a diverse organization. And I think it's also a lot of times we look at empathy and performance, I think they just go hand in hand, and you really need to actually look at how empathy builds culture, which means that you can actually service your employees better, your customers better, which means you can become more innovative. It directly impacts your top line and bottom line. So I'm a great believer, and it's something that we also very much pay very close attention to at BBTV.
Well, Shahrzad Rafati from Broadband TV, thank you so much. She's a woman who started it all from the ground up with her bare hands and built a multinational, multi-million-dollar organization. Tamara Vrooman, the CEO of Vancouver Airport Authority, she took over a few big organizations, and both of these women have made that culture their own, and very much appreciate your time today. I'm Christy Clark. I am the chair of Roots of Empathy, and I hope you will share this important conversation with your social media community. I hope you'll also follow us on social media at rootsofempathy.org. Join us in making empathy and kindness a worldwide movement. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, I like that. Empathy saves businesses money. Thank you so much, Tamara, Shahrzad, and to Christy for leading that excellent discussion about empathy in leadership. I think you've given many corporate leaders and leaders in general a lot to think about.